Hello everyone, welcome to the ACCT 152 Sage 50 lecture. So in this lecture what we're going to do is we're going to cover chapter 4 from the textbook which is Learning Sage 50 2021, and I'm going to divide this chapter into two parts. What we're going to do is we're going to go through setting up the company from scratch. So we're going to assume that there is a company called Sarah Kitchen, and then what we're going to do is we're going to set up the company on Sage 50, and then once we have the company set up, we will go through the 10 step that is mentioned in this chapter, and we'll set up the company, we'll set up the historical information, which is entering the trial balance amounts, and then enter the historical information for account receivable and accounts payable, and make this company ready to use in Sage 50, and then we will start recording transactions in the following month. So what's going to happen in this chapter is we are going to go through the 10 steps that's mentioned in the textbook. So if you are using the online textbook, this is available for all of you guys. So I always recommend going into a textbook and then look at chapter 4, and then similar to what we discussed in chapter 1, there's chapter 4, which is a reading itself with all the steps, and these are the database files that you may need, but there's only exercise that are available where you're not starting it from scratch. But chapter 4a that we are covering up, we're starting the company from scratch, so we don't need a company database file. And then there is an exercise 2, 4, which requires you to start at a particular step. For that you are given the database files. Okay, so we don't need a database file, so you are reading through the steps that's mentioned in the textbook and then doing those steps in Sage 50 2021 module, 2021 software. So one thing that I will definitely put a disclaimer to this website, I'm not going to go through every single step. So technically I'm not going through all the detail, but I'll be covering up all the major steps that are in the textbook. So it will give you a good walkthrough process as what step need to be done and why you're doing those steps. So that information is provided in this lecture. So when you are coming to the chapter, I always recommend go to the full screen mode. So when you go in a full screen mode, you will have all the major steps. So you can always navigate from here, step 1, scroll down all the way, complete every exercise that's given. Then your step 2 is right here. So you don't need to go through the tabs, but that tabs does help. You are going through every single step that's mentioned in this textbook. Okay, so when you look at on the left hand side, you see there's step 1, creating a company, step 2, looking at user preferences, step 3 is changing the company settings, and step 4, where we spend most of the time, is creating the GL accounts. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to divide this lecture into two parts. First, we'll complete up to step 4, which is setting up the accounts, and then the second part of the video will start from step 5, which is linking the accounts, setting up the taxes, and enter the opening balances, and then we'll finish it up at the end of step 10. Okay, so as I mentioned, you are creating accounts, then we'll link those accounts to a particular module, which is AP and AR that we're going to use. Then we set up the sales taxes. In Ontario, we have sales taxes, which is GST and HST. So we'll look at how we set that up in Sage 50. Then we enter the opening balances that's given in a trial balance, because when you're starting the company from scratch on Sage 50, there will be some historical information, which is the opening balances for those accounts. So that one we will set up in step 7. Once that's done, we will enter the credit card. So if a company has a credit card that it uses, we will enter the credit card information, and then we'll set up the subledger. So in this chapter, we are doing accounts payable and account receivable. So what we'll do is we'll look at what is my outstanding vendors. We'll enter their balances with the detail of each invoice, and then we'll enter the balances for the customer. So any outstanding invoices from a customer, we enter those historical information. Once all that is done, then we'll make the company file ready, which means that we can tell the system that we finish entering the historical information. And once that is done, system will give you a message saying you're ready to start entering the transactions. after the period that when you enter the trial balance. Okay, so that's when we ready to record transactions. If the company file already have a history tab here, that means the company is not ready to use to record entries. Okay, so therefore you have to make the company file ready to use to start recording transactions. And if there is any error, it will give you that there is error. If there is error in setting up the historical information, if the GL account doesn't balance with historical information, you get an error message and you have to fix that. Okay, that's something that we'll discuss when we go through the steps. Okay, so this was a brief of chapter 4. Now what we're going to do is we're going to start the first part of the lecture where we're actually going to go through step 1 all the way to step 4. Now, as you remember in chapter 1, what we did, we started chapter 1 by opening up, downloading the database file, and then opening the file, unzipping the file first, and then opening that on Sage 50. So that is only applicable if you have the company file given. So in this case, in chapter 4, we're setting up a company from scratch. And that's exactly what you're going to do in your test 1 as well. So you want to make sure that you understand the whole process of setting up the company from scratch. So how do we start this exercise? Now you are going to create a company. So therefore you have to have a location of the file where you want to save it. The first thing that you will do is you will create a folder where you want the company file to be saved. Okay, so what I have told you in last week as well in your last lecture is we are going to create a particular folder. Okay, so if you're not in my course and you're doing this Sage 50 learning by yourself, what you do is you create a particular folder where all your files are going to be saved. That is always the best practice. So in your case, you are enrolled into a fall 2022 course. You click on this particular tab. So the folder that we created, ACCT 152 2022 fall. If you are in another course in 2023 winter in the future, you can just create a folder and you name it accordingly. Inside that folder, I want you guys to see what works for you, but this is my standard practice that I've been using for last few semesters. I'll create a database file for chapters and I'll create a backup. If you are creating multiple backups, you can have another folder where you only keep the backups and the original file stays in the same folder. And the same thing you do with the challenge exercise. You have a challenge exercise files where you download and work on the file, which are right here. And if you create backups for the challenge exercise, you can do that right here. Then we have assignments and exams. So if I'm giving you any online assignments and you download and you want to change the name, you can do that, but you will keep the files in this particular folder. And then reports. Now here we're working on the chapter file. So what we will do is we'll go into a chapter, and now I don't need to download, but I'm going to create a file. So therefore what I will do is I'll create a folder here and I will name it 04 because it's chapter 4 Sarah Kitchen. Okay, so I know that this is the folder where I'm going to save my file. Okay, this folder is empty because I don't have anything in there. I just created a folder. So this is typically a parking location where my file is going to be saved. So now you're going to start working on chapter 4. So if you look at chapter 4, the very first step is creating a company file. Okay, so again, when you do chapter 4, you're going to go through the steps that are mentioned in this exercise and follow it along. Read the information because they're very informative information that is there, and there's a reason for all the information there. So therefore I recommend you guys to go through that. And these are the account numbers we'll be using, but we'll come back to it later on. So now to start chapter 4, what we need to do is we need to open Sage 50 on your computer. So if you're working on the AppStream, obviously you're going to launch Sage 50 from the AppStream website. Once you launch it, then you go into your all program right here and look for Sage 50. Okay, I already have it open, so I'm not going to go through that. But if you were, then what you do is you will go into all apps. I'll look for Sage, everybody has a different screen because you may use different types of windows. So in my case, this is how it shows up. You don't have all the Sage. I have all the Sages, different versions, but we're working on 2021. So you will click on this one. I don't need to click because I already have it open on my screen. Once you click on it, then what it does is it will take you to this screen. Okay, so when you come on this screen, if you remember from chapter 1, we said select an existing company. That is because we already have the file. Now what we're doing is we are creating a brand new company. So here we're going to select the option as create a new company. And once we click on that, we press OK. And now you are going to go through these 6 steps. Okay. Now these 6 steps is we start introducing. Okay, that's fine. We press next. And here we enter the information about the company. So you guys need to enter the whole detail. I'm not going to enter the whole detail. All I'm going to do is I'm going to say Sarah Kitchen. And I'll put student name, which is I'm going to put my name here. And I'll put Ontario. And I'll put this city as Toronto. Okay. And when you do that, you want to enter the whole detail that's given in your test book. And go next. And now this is a very useful information. Here it tells you what is your fiscal start date. So we're going to come right here and say, what is my fiscal start date? So here this is the address. So fiscal start date is 01/01/2026. 01. So here it's different. Now based on your computer setting, you may see the dates are different. So when I did this test book, the date was showing up as DDMMYY. Now I'm using a different computer. My computer setting is YYMMDD. So therefore I have to put the year, which is 2026, and the month is 01. Now this is a dash I need to enter. Now the date is 01. So it's January 1st, 2026. Then we have the earliest transaction date. The earliest transaction date is when was your last transaction when you were recorded, which was the trial balance given to you. So you were given a trial balance on August 31st, 2026. So we're going to select August 31st, 2026. Okay, you don't have to worry about the fiscal year end date because this gets automatically recorded, because it's always 1 year period. So whenever is the start date, based on that we'll select your end date. Obviously it is January 1st as a start date, end date is December 31st, 2026. Press next. Now you have to pay careful attention to these 3 options. So we have 3 options here. Say, okay, have Sage 50 create a list of accounts based on your business type. So this is typically, if you want to take a shortcut, you can tell the Sage 50 to create the chart of accounts based on the type of business that you're going to select in the next step. So here you're not going to create the accounts, it will automatically create it for you based on the nature of your business. But that's not what we want to do. We want to create an account because we already have the trial balance. So we don't want to create any extra accounts or unnecessary account that we have to go back and change it and delete it. Okay, so we will skip this option. Then we have a second option where you can have the Sage 50 create a list of account from an export file. Some companies, what they do is they create a master list on an Excel and then export it into Sage 50. So if you are one of that company or you have that functionality, you can always do that. If you're using QuickBooks, you can export the trial balance from the QuickBooks as well through an export functionality. Okay, if you're pro in that in the future, you can use that function and then have that done when you're creating a new company. Okay, now what we are going to use in this course is let me build the account. So what we will do is we'll create the accounts based on the list that we have. And that's exactly what you're going to do for your assignment as well as for your first test, which is the midterm test number 1. So we're going to select, say, you're going to say that we're going to create the accounts by ourselves. Next. Once you click next, it gives you a warning saying you selected the option to create a new account by yourself. Are you okay with that? Okay, so if you are, then what you do is you press yes. Do you want to continue and create your own list of account? We're going to say yes. And now here it's going to ask you the type of business that you're in. So here when we look at the bottom, see what is the type of this business. I think it's a retail. Yes, so it is a retail. And now here ask you the name of the company. We said Sara Kitchen, Deepak Sharma. And then here it's ask you the location. Now this is what's important because you want to make sure that you know where your file is getting saved, because anything that you're going to do after this is going to automatically save in this particular location. I don't want to randomly have this selected, so I'm going to click browse to make sure. See, by default is going to the same folder, which is photos, because remember it remembers where the other file was when we open the photos, so it's technically are saving this file in the same location. We don't want to do that. I prefer that every single company file should have its own separate folder. So that's why I created number 4 Sara Kitchen. So I select it and press OK, and then next, then click finish. Now when you click finish, depending on your computer, it will take a few minutes to set up the company file. Okay, so if you are saving it on the external drive, which is USB, then it will take even more time. So I can't show you the bar because it's on my other screen. It's putting a percentage as 36, 39, and it's increasing as the progress happens. Sitting at 72% right now. This is something that will be different for everybody depending on your computer, how fast is your computer is. So once everything is done, you get this message saying congratulations, you successfully created your company. And now we said close. Once you close, your company file is going to open. Now if you go back here, you see that this folder was empty. Now it has a file and a folder. And now your company file is ready and opened. Okay, so now this company file is empty. There is no chart of account, there is no historical information. So what we have to do is we have to go through these steps to make sure we complete everything. So we're done with creating the company file. Now we will go into step number 2, which is setting the user preferences. So now when you come right here, you see that we have so many modules. In chapter 4a, we're only using the supplier, which is accounts payable, and a customer module. We don't use inventory, we're not going to use employees, we're not going to use a division. So to do that, what we need to do is go into setup and user preferences. So I'm an accountant, I want to use the accounting terms. Okay, I don't want to see vendors or suppliers, I want to see accounts receivable, accounts payable, and then in some other places as well, we want to use the accounting terminology. You can go through all the other options that you have. Nothing is so important for us, we can skip that. Go into the view. Now here we see that all these things are check mark. I want to use customer, I want to use vendor. I do not want to use inventory, I don't want to use employees, I don't want to use divisions. So if you want to change any other settings, you can do that as well. I will skip it for now. Now I'll show you guys the other stuff, the color scheme. If you have certain colors you want to use for different modules or different types of transactions, you can do that. If you want to get a confirmation, you can do that. If you want certain pop-ups not to show, you can remove those as well. Okay, this was something that was important for us to do. We did it. Now we press OK. Now you see that the name of these has been changed from customer to vendor, customer and vendor to receivables and payable. And now we don't see inventory division and payroll because we don't want to use that anymore. there's an appendix 4b that you may do after you complete 4a. In that one, you are setting up the inventory, so you kind of get an understanding on the inventory module as well as how we set up the inventory module. So now we finish with step number 2. Now we're going to step number 3, which is changing the system settings. Now this is very important. I want you guys to pay attention on this one because you may come into this more often when you are working on the company files in the future chapters as well. So settings are found under setup. So you go into the setup, click on settings. So when you click on settings, you see there are different settings for different modules. So if you didn't have inactivated the payroll inventory, you will see those tabs here as well. We start with the company. So you have this plus icon. You click on that, it will show you all the information. So you see that date format that we were showing, it was showing the way that it is. So if you want to change it, you can change it here. I don't want to touch that now, but if you have your company use certain formats, you can change it right here. Okay. So there are different things. So click on the information. So if you want to change the address, you can always do that here as well. I don't recommend changing this because this is you will set it once and don't change it after. System, if you're using cash accounting, which is not acceptable accounting, but the system still allows you to use cash accounting if you wanted to use it. If you want to have a backups done certain times on a periodic basis, you can have the system remembers how often you want to do a backup. This is not applicable for us, but Sage 50 also integrate with Microsoft 365. So if you're planning of using 365 Microsoft, you can integrate your system with that as well. Payment processing also, if you want to do EFTs, this system is capable. We don't cover that in this course. So here we will come back to this because we're going to enter the credit card information. We'll come back to sales taxes when we set up the sales taxes. If you're using multiple currencies, you can do that here. We don't cover that in this course, but that's where you come in. These are where all the forms are. So if you want to change the invoice number, sales order, delivery dates, order numbers, you can change any of those things here. Okay. So you will notice that there by default starts from 1. But if your company has historical information, you want to start the invoice number at a particular number, you enter that number and system will remember that from here. Emails, if you have different email addresses, you can link them here. Date format we talked about. Shipping, this is also a new feature that Sage 50 introduced, but you have to subscribe for it. If you want to track your shipment, you can do that as well. If you have a company logo, you can put the logo here. So every time you create an invoice, it will show up on there. If you want to add any additional tabs or titles, you can do that here. So these are the accounts, how there are budgets, numbering, how do you want the account to be numbered. So this is what I mentioned. This is how system recognize the accounts or assets from 1000 to 199, liabilities, equity, revenue. So these are the numbers that you should be using when you're creating these accounts. We don't do the department accounting, but if you do these, this is where you can create different codes for different departments. If you want to create additional fields, you can do that here. This is where we link certain accounts to the GL account. So we'll skip that for now. Then we have a payable and receivable settings. We'll come back to it when we actually going to do the payable and receivable setup. Okay, so this is where you come in to change the payables and receivables setting. So let's see here if the system is going to ask us to do that now or later on. Again, this is all very informative. Anything that a system asks you to do, you must do it. I'm not doing it because I'm not completing the entire chapter. So you see that here system asks you to enter the next invoice number as 922, so you should enter that. I can enter that as well, it's not a big thing. So I go into the forms and here I do is 922. So I recommend you guys to make sure you read all through all that. They're all very useful information. I briefly told you about that as well, but it's important you read through that as well. So here we click on the link up and look at the payable, and okay, so we are going to make the changes here. So here under the option, we're going to make sure we change that. Okay, so I think what we'll do is we'll go into the receivables and payable. So I'll look at the address here. If you want to have a different address for the payable, you can enter options. So how is your aging for the accounts payable? Is 30 days, 60 days, and 90 days. If you have anything different, you can change it. Now calculate discount before taxes. So it's always like that. You want to calculate the discount before taxes. You will skip that. Names, if you want to add a particular field, a different name, you can do that as well. And then we have a link ups. We will skip the link ups for now. We will going to come back to the link ups after. Okay, so we'll come to the link up once we have the GL accounts created. Same thing with the address, our receivables, we go through the option. So we have 30, 60, and 90. If you want to change, you can change that as well. And here, interest charges, if you have interest applicable, then you can select it, but you don't have that one, so we skip that as well. So we'll leave everything as default. Come to the discount here. If you have a term that's discountable, you can put the discountable term. So let's see what it says for us to do. It says 210 net 30 and calculate the discount before taxes. So we need to do that as well. So 210 net 30. That means the customer will get 2% discount if they pay in 10 days, otherwise it's 30 days. And then calculate the discount before taxes. So it's important we do a check mark on that. So this is only if you have an online feature for collecting payments. We can do that here. Comments, if you want to enter certain comments, you want to use additional fields, you can do that here. Then link up accounts, and that's something I will come back after. Okay, so that's pretty much cover up the major part of the settings. Now we press OK. Now everything that we changed, it gets applied. Okay, so that covers up step 3. Now we're coming to step number 4. Now that's an important piece because that's where you're going to get majority of your marks. So what's going to happen in your exam is you're going to given a trial balance. Okay, what the trial balance is going to have is going to have a list of accounts with their balances. So when you do have a given a trial balance, there's 2 things you need to do. First, you need to create the accounts. Once your accounts are created, then you're going to enter the balances. The balances are done in step number 7. When you become expert on this, you can do both of these things together. Okay, but for now, what we do is we set up the accounts first and then go to step 5, 6, and 7 to enter the opening balances. Okay, now step 4. Okay, so I want you guys to read through all that because there are very useful information again. What I'm going to tell you is that there are two ways you can set up the chart of account. There's a long way, there's a short way. But when you do take the shortcut, you want to make sure that you understand the basics behind the creating account, because once you start using the second method where you are creating chart of accounts on a one particular place, it's faster, but then there's a chances of you making an error, and then if you have to fix it before you come out of that window. Now I'm going to show you guys how to create an account, but before I do that, I'm going to go right into the list of the account. So here is your list of accounts, okay, broken down between asset, liabilities, equity, revenue, expenses. Shows you guys how to create it, how to delete, how to modify an account. All that information is given. What I'm interested is looking at the full picture of what is my chart of account. Okay, now this is what's important. Okay, I want you guys to make sure you spend some time on understanding how the structure of this works. Okay, so when you're given a trial balance, you don't going to be given the format like this. What you're given is simply a list of accounts with their balances. It is your responsibility to understand what category they belong, and if there's a current assets or capital asset, you want to put them in the right places and then assign the right class of the asset. Okay. Now, once you understand that part, the next part you want to understand is the type of account. So in Sage 50, before you create an account, you wanted to make sure that you have a heading for the account. So whenever you create a heading, that's not a posting account. So you see that we created a header called current asset. So that means this is the title of these head accounts, 1000, and we call that current assets, and this is H. H means the heading. Once you create a heading, then you're going to put all the assets, current asset account in that heading account. Once you finish entering all the current asset account, then you're going to finish that with the total current asset. And what we call this is a total of the account of the head accounts. Okay, so which will add up all the accounts from here. That's number one. Then if you're creating a posting account, then you have to remember there are two types of posting account we can create. There's one which is A, then there is another one which is G. Okay, A represent a sub account. Anytime you're creating an account which is a sub account, that means it will get added as a sub total. So you see that there are so many bank accounts, and what I want to do is I want to do a total for my sub account after. So what I do is I create a sub account called petty cash, make that a sub account, and then the rule of thumb is that anytime there's a sub account, it should end with the sub total. So I do a cash, bank, then a credit card receivable, which is also considered to be a cash account because I'm going to receive the money, and then now I finish all the bank accounts, then I do a total cash or total bank, whatever you want to name it, and that is my sub total. And same thing that happening with the account receivable. Account receivable is an allowance account. Okay, so I say account receivable is my sub account. Allowance for doubtful account is also my sub account because it's a negative, and then I add them together, that gives me a net account receivable, and that's my sub total for these two. So you always remember that anytime there's an A, it should end with S. Once it ends, then you're going to create a different type of account. Now G represent a group account by itself, so they don't relate with any sub accounts, they are an account by itself. So inventory, if I have multiple inventory account, then I do the same thing. I say inventory A, inventory B, and then do a total inventory and then make that as a S. Okay, in this case that's not applicable, so we only have one inventory account, we create that as a G. And then we look at the store office supplies, and that's also a G by itself. And then now I've finished with all my current assets. I want to create capital account, but before I create a capital asset account, I want to finish my current assets. So in that case, numbering is very important because it stays in the sequence. So when you finish with 1260, you want to give a little bit of a room in case you want to create more accounts. Then I finish my current assets as 1299 as a total current asset, and then I create that account as a T. Then you do the same thing, you go into create another header which is capital asset as an H, and then list all the capital assets and then do a total for the capital asset. Then you go into a liability section, do the same thing, we create a header and then do a total, then do another header, then do a total and list all the accounts in between. Same thing with the equity, revenue, and expenses. Okay, so you have to make sure you complete the entire chart of account. It will take some time, but you have to do it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to illustrate that with you and create the current assets. Then I'm going to pause my video, and then I will come back with the second video where I will start with step number 5. Okay, so but I'll walk you guys through this, and then what you do is you will complete the rest of the accounts by yourself, and then come back to this image to make sure your accounts look exactly like this. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the Sage 50. So as I mentioned, there are two ways you create an account. To create an account, you need to go into a company. First way to create an account is you go into a chart of account. Let's say, you know what, before we even go into add account, I'm going to say view accounts. And what I see here is asset, liabilities, equity, revenue, expense. There is no account. The account that I see is 13600, which is current earnings. But that's not required because this is just by default an account where all the earnings are going to get closed, okay, which is part of your equity account. So this is the only account that exists. Now when I create an account, I can go back into the chart of account and say add, or I can click on modify, edit, create. So see there, create an account. I click here, it will take me to the screen. Okay, if I don't do that, I'll click here and say add account. It will take me to the same screen. Okay, so either way, you are going to go into that particular screen. So if I'm using this method of creating an account, I want to make sure this stays at the back so I can see how the accounts are being created as I add more accounts. So here I'm going to say create a new account. I'm going to start with the very first account, which is 1000, and I will call this is my current assets. So now this is what I was referring to as a type. So I want to make sure you select the right type. So this is a group heading. You see that as soon as I click group heading, there is no class option because we don't post this account. This is just the header. Okay. So for this account, when you create a header or a total, you don't have to do anything. All we do is add. Now you can say save and close. If you save and close, you come back to this page and then you go into this again. Okay, so I'll do it again, and I say now okay, the next account I have is 1005, and I call this petty cash. Now I have two options to make that a subgroup account or a group account. Now what I mentioned to you guys is subgroup account if you have multiple accounts that need to put together with the subtotal. So in that case, we'll make a subgroup account. But if there's no subgroups, then we'll just make that a group account. So in this case, the petty cash has to go together with all the other bank accounts. So we'll make this a subgroup account. So I'm going to a class option, and here you have to select the appropriate class type. You want to be as close as you can. So this is a cash, so we'll put as a cash. We don't need to worry about the deposit number, so that's fine. We don't have to worry about anything else. What we do is we can do save and close, or say create another. Create another, that takes you to the, and then in the back you see that it's added right here. Then here we'll do another one, that's 1010 bank account checking. Okay, and then again, because it's a subgroup, so like the subgroup account, come into the class option, we make that as a bank account. Now you see that as soon as I put a bank account, it asks me the transit number and all that information. You can enter that here, okay, if you are given. If you're not, you can skip it. Here ask you the deposit number, you can enter that. If you want to enter the check number, you can click on this tab, it will take you to the check place. No, it won't because you have to save it. So I'll show you guys later on where to go in changing the check number. But you can always come back to the account and it will automatically take you to the settings where you have to enter the next check number. You don't have to go through any of the tabs. Technically, you're always working on these two places. Now you click create another. Now you're in another account. The next one we have is 1011, and that one is bank account. And we say credit card receivables. Okay, I cannot enter such a big number, so I'll just keep it right here. Now this is also subgroup because it belongs to the same category. Class option, we make it credit card receivable, and then create another. Now the next account I have is account receivable. Now the account receivable doesn't belong to the bank. They have That's a separate category. So now I finished with all my bank account. Now I have to finish the total. So anytime there's an A account, it has to end with S before I go into the next category. So here I make this account a subgroup total, and then here I'm going to do this is maybe you can leave a little bit of a room, so that way you don't if you're creating a more cash accounts, you can always have a room to add more accounts. And here we can say cash total. Okay, and then we'll do a subgroup total and then create another. Now you see that it has A and with S, and you see that how it shows up that there's a account balances, and this will just be a number that's going to add these three accounts. Okay, so this is the one way you can create accounts. Some people prefer to do this because you're adding, and there's you can see on the at the back what's happening, and then if there's chances you made an error, you can simply go in and click on this edit icon right here. It takes you to that, and you can change whatever you want to change. Okay, so this is one way you create account. The second way you create accounts is you go into the setup and you go into the setup guide. When you go into setup guide, you have three things because you need to set up a customer and supply later. Right now we only work on the accounts. So in here, this is more faster because you're doing more like an Excel sheet where you're entering the account numbers and you're just filling up the information that's required. Okay, and then you can enter the balances as well, but I don't recommend you do that for this chapter. But later on when you do challenge exercise, then you can enter the balances at the same time. Okay, but we'll do the balances after. So now I'm going to complete the rest of my account current assets right here. Now always remember the numbering is important because that's how the accounts will show up in your list. So next account we have is we're going to create the account receivable. So 1200, and then here we're going to enter the name. Account receivable. Now here you enter the type. This is also subgroup, and we'll make this account receivable. And then now this is what you can do is always save the changes to words without asking, or it's always gonna ask you this. Okay, so if you don't want to get this message every time, you say save it every time you enter a line, so if you don't get that message again. So now we know the next one is 1210, and that's allowance for doubtful allowance for bad debt. Okay, that's also a subgroup. Always remember that this is also has a contra balance because it's always opposite of what the account receivable is. So when you enter the balance here, you're going to enter that as a negative. Okay, then you finish with your account receivable. Then you have to do a subtotal. We do is 1219, and we say net receivables. Okay, and that is my subgroup total, and that is going to be account receivable. So subgroup services subgroup total. See, anytime you do this, it says we don't require to put a class because it's not applicable. Now we move it to the next one, which is inventory 1240, and here this is inventory, and this is a group account because there's no another inventory account that's related. Now we enter the type is inventory. Okay, then we go into the next one is 1260, and that is store dash office supplies. That's also group account, and we'll make it as, okay, we don't have office supplies category, we will do is other current assets. Now I finished with my current assets. Now I have to do is I need to finish, or what I'll do is I'll do 1299 and make this total current assets and then make this a group total. Now you see that this was a group heading, this is the group total, right? Then this was a subgroup, there's a subgroup total, then there's a subgroup, and there's a subgroup total, then there's a subgroup, and then these are group accounts. We don't need to do anything with the group accounts. Now you finish with all of them. Then this group heading has to finish before you create a new subgroup. Okay. Now when you are doing this, you want to always make sure you validate. Okay. Now if I click validate, it's going to say that your accounts are not in a logical order. The reason is there is a missing group heading before 13600. That means before 3600. So everything, that means all the other accounts that you create before 3600, they are in logical order. The reason 3600 is not, because there is no heading for that. But when we create an equity account, we create a heading and we'll make this is part of your equity account. So we fix that after. So now you see that the error always tells you where the error is. So technically now all the accounts from 1000 to 1299, they are created properly. So if you're missing a subgroup total, you're missing a group total, it will give you that error and then you can fix it. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop the video here. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to offline create all the accounts and then come back, and then we'll finish up with step 5 to step 10 in the next video. Okay. So what I'll recommend for you guys to do is, if you finish listening to this video, you go back to your chapter and make sure you try to do these accounts by yourself. You can use any method, the first method I explained or the second method, and you want to make sure that you have all these accounts created in the same format. And don't try to memorize that these are A or S. You want to make sure understand why they are A and why they are G, and when are you creating the group heading and why are you creating those group headings. Okay, because when you are working as a bookkeeper and accountant, your manager will tell you, okay, I want headings for these. So they want to categorize certain type of accounts so they can see the totals for that in the financial statement. And to do that in CH50, you have the flexibility of creating headings for every asset or revenue. Okay, so I'll pause the video now, and then I'll see you in the next video. We'll finish up this chapter from step 5 to step 10. All right, take care then, and then I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.